Welcome to The Human Factor, the CEO to CEO video series from Inc. I'm Eric Schoenberg, Inc.'s former editor-in-chief and CEO. Part of a leader's job, maybe the biggest part, is to impart a sense of mission to customers and to the employees they lead. The why, as Simon Sinek has coined the term, has to be bigger than the company's bottom line or even its product. Now, some brands get it. Think of Patagonia, which makes clothing but is about sustainability, or Apple, which makes smartphones but is about creativity. Today's guest is Niren Chaudhary, the CEO of Panera Brands, which has managed as much as any company in the fast casual dining industry to have captured mission. Think of Panera, which owns Caribou Coffee and Einstein Bagels, as well as Panera Bread, and what comes to mind? Comfort? Definitely. Healthy food? Yeah. It's also about sustainability. Last fall, Panera became the first in its field to promise to be carbon positive by 2050. Now, how do you get 140,000 roughly employees in 4,000 stores in 10 countries to line up behind that? Well, we'll find out from the CEO behind the move, Niren Chaudhary. Hey, Niren, welcome to the show.
Hey, Eric.
It's good to see you. Thanks for being on the show. Now, I want to get to sustainability, but first I want to dig into you a little bit and let people get familiar with you. To quote, I think, is it Wordsworth? The child is father to the CEO. So let's ask, where are you from? Where were you born? Where were you raised? And how did that shape you as a leader?
Eric, it's great to see you. Well, I was born in India, in the northern state called Jammu and Kashmir. Born to very loving parents, and grew up in different cities. My father was working for the government services, so I followed him around. Had some great education there. Did my economics undergrad, then did my MBA. So finished my school in Delhi. And then began my career working for the Tatas, which is one of the largest corporate houses in India.
Mm.
And that's how it all began. But I think, I don't know if you've been to India, but India is a fascinating country of over 1.2 billion people. And, huge amounts of diversity. And I think I'm obviously massively shaped by my culture, my family, and some of the things that I carry in my heart even today. So, for example, be focused on the effort and don't really worry too much about the result. Do the very best that you can do in terms of what you put in, and the right thing invariably follows. I think the importance of family, the importance of contributing to the community and to the planet. I think these were some of the values that have shaped me because of my childhood, my parents, and also the country in which I grew up in.
Okay, well that makes sense. Now, after you came to the U.S. And before Panera, you were at Yum Brands and Krispy Kreme. As a matter of fact, at Yum, you were there for 23 years, which is about the same amount of time that I spent at Time Inc., and I know what a formative experience that was. What was your first leadership job there, and were there some instructive mistakes, stumbles, rookie errors that you made along the way?
Well, those rookie errors don't stop, Eric. They follow me around every single day. But yeah, I've had a fascinating career, I have to say. So in India, like I mentioned, I started with the Tata Group, and I joined the hotels business. I worked with the Intercontinental Hotel in New Delhi. That's where I started my career. And after that, soon thereafter, I joined Yum Brands, which, as you mentioned, is one of the world's largest restaurant companies. Pizza Hut, KFC, Taco Bell. I worked with them for 23 years. And I had, I think, the privilege of having lived and worked in different countries all over the world. So I worked in India. I ran all three brands. I also lived and worked in Europe. I lived in Holland, lived in Germany, ran the business there, went to the UK. And then finally, my last job at the company, I was the global president for KFC, running about 5,000 stores across 50 countries. And it is just an absolutely fascinating time. So, tremendous amount of learnings at Yum Brands. I think after which I joined JAB, and as you mentioned, Krispy Kreme. And then 3 years ago came to Panera Bread. So here's the thing. I have always been drawn to high quality brands that are leaders in their respective categories for all the brands that I mentioned. And I, at the pinnacle of that aspiration, was Panera Bread. And in all these years in working in the restaurant business, I always sort of looked up to Panera Bread as being absolutely the ultimate benchmark. So you can imagine my delight at coming to Panera Bread as a CEO about 3 years back. And the reason is because I eat Panera every single day. It's food that I feel good about eating, and I want to take this idea to the world, and I'm so excited by that. But to your question about learnings and mistakes, let me share with you. I think the biggest learning that I've had over my close to say 30 odd years in retail business, food retail business, is the following. I think leaders and companies have to show up in this world not only to create enterprise value, but also to have an impact agenda for the communities in which they serve, but also for the planet. To be able to do that, you need to have a strategy that you should be able to then execute. I believe that strategy is important, but execution is disproportionately important. And those companies that execute well are the ones that win. Because strategy is to do with the intellect. Execution, however, is to do with the heart. It's about inspiring yourself and your teams to want to win more than anybody else. And that's not easy. And that in turn is a function of the right people doing the right things the right way. And therefore, I think what I have learned is the power of a people-first culture is essentially a culture that has also a broader impact agenda serving all stakeholders is the unlock towards superior execution and being able to win.
Well, Niren, tell me what people first means to you.
Well, people first very simply means my business philosophy is that the job of any leader is to take care of his or her associates and employees. And people, I believe, in that sense, come first. If you do that and really take care of them, they in turn feel inspired to delight your end customers and also serve the community, which is how you end up creating enterprise value. So people come first. That's what I mean by a people-first culture. And I think by just embracing that simple principle, one can really unlock this chain reaction and a multiplier impact that eventually creates enterprise value, but you create it by focusing on people and not so much directly in terms of shareholder wealth creation. So that's what I mean by people first.
Okay, all right, I get it. But let's drill down a little bit through that idea, rather to the day-to-day of running teams. One of the pitfalls that leaders fall into, and I've seen it everywhere I've worked, is that you can embrace an idea like people first or that kind of thing. People are the most important asset of this company. It's phrased lots of different ways. The pitfall is that you manage your company, you manage your team to be liked rather than to lead them in the direction that needs to be done, that needs to be set a direction for the company. That sometimes, you cannot be liked. It's not actually part of the job description. How did you manage that in your own leadership journey?
Yeah, I think sometimes I think leaders think that there's a contradiction and there's a spectrum of either wanting to be liked or being respected, and that is somehow a choice. I don't see these two being mutually exclusive. I think you want to be liked and you want to be respected. Both are important. And I would argue that it is possible. I think what is important is that if you show up with authenticity, uh, if you show up in being very congruent in who you are, what you say, and how you behave, then, and if you care genuinely, and caring doesn't mean that you're not confrontational or you don't push people or you don't demand them to be the very best version of themselves. To me, caring means exactly that. That being so invested in the people around you that you want them to fulfill their true potential. And if you have that mindset and you push your teams with that filter every single day, then you do that individually, collectively, and as an enterprise. So tough love is love as well, you know. So I don't think it is all about just being nice to each other. I think you have to be honest, congruent, courageous, curious, encourage productive conflict, and in doing so, help the people around you to unlock their full potential, and in that pursuit, make the enterprise successful.
Managing productive conflict is one of the real challenges. A lot of leaders get it wrong. How does it work with you? How do you encourage your team to confront each other when necessary and yet not lose trust?
I think you can have, ironically, I think I have learned that productive conflict um, is a big determinant of having an effective and highly effective team. If you see people disagreeing, that is not a sign of disharmony as long as it's done respectfully. I think it is a sign of a very strong team. Now, you can't just do that. You know, you have to have the foundation to be able to have very honest conversations and productive conflict. And that, I think, requires a foundational bridge of trust that needs to precede conflict, which means that you encourage the relationship that you have with those who work with you, and also amongst each other, to have a foundation of trust. If you have trust, then you can have conflict. If you have conflict, you have greater commitment. If you have greater commitment, then that's how you kind of drive results and achieve the goals that you have set out to do. Now, trust in turn is a function of congruence of what you think, feel, say, and do, being consistent, and simple things like honoring your promises, and being loyal to those who are not around. And I think if you're very mindful of showing up in a way that's trustworthy, and encouraging it, then you create an environment in which people feel more comfortable to disagree.
Good. Okay. Yeah, I hear what you're saying about consistency and keeping your promises. In conflict, you've said rightly that conflict is perfectly acceptable as long as it's conducted with respect. One of my key mentors, Alan Mulally, who was the CEO of Ford and Boeing, had a list of behaviors that he would not tolerate on his leadership team. You couldn't, no eye rolling, for example, at meetings. You had to put the phones down under the table or turn them off or leave them at the door. Do you have a list of sort of unacceptable behaviors on your leadership team?
Absolutely. I think this is actually such a powerful, agreement to have with the leadership team of what I call the rules of engagement. You know, how do we want to show up and what we should not be doing? And I'll share with you some of the ones that we live by. First one is that we will always, as an executive team, consider and have the mindset that the executive team is our first team. We are loyal first to the executive team and then to our functional teams. Second is that we will always show up as business leaders first and functional leaders second. Third, if there is a conflict and we don't like something that's happened, we will resolve that conflict promptly and directly with the person concerned and not triangulate. Next, we will make decisions only after somebody in that room disagrees. Somebody has to disagree. Otherwise, we are not making a decision. Another one is we will resist hands from the grave, or I told you so, which is you discuss, you debate, you disagree, and then you should leave the room as one team and one decision and only one version of the truth. And there is no I told you so in case things go wrong. So I call it eliminate hands from the grave. So
I
those
love that expression.
so I think those are some of the ways in which we hold each other accountable. We have fun doing it, and they say, "Hey, listen, watch for the hands from the grave," and "No, I told you so's," and it's remarkable, Eric, that if a team has clarity on the no-go areas, how powerful that can be towards creating a highly effective team. And I've seen the benefit of that, and I'm a big believer.
I love this, one of your points there about no decision is made until someone disagrees. Can you give me an example of how that works?
So what works is that, I came into Panera Bread, as I mentioned, 3 years ago, and I was succeeding a phenomenally talented founder, Ron Sheikh, who's built an incredibly successful enterprise over the last 30 years. Big shoes to fill. But, as a founder retired, the organization was very used to actually a convergent culture. The founder would say, whatever the founder said, people would do because the founder was invariably right. And I think that can work up to a point, but beyond a point, you want people to disagree and debate, and so that the quality of decisions are really superior and much better. So that was the background, and to encourage that, I would sit and say, and people would say, we agree, and I would say, listen, if you really want to get ahead in this company, disagree with me, and those who disagree, I'm going to celebrate you. And even then, that wouldn't work because people would still sort of wonder, what the hell is this guy talking about? Then we said, okay, we're going to have a discussion, but if nobody disagrees, we're going to just sit here and we won't take a decision. And I think that simple thing is so powerful. And we said it can be anybody. It could be somebody who thinks it's a good decision, but okay, now tell me why this decision doesn't make sense. Maybe play act. I don't care.
Right.
But disagree, So I think, and that has slowly started permeating into our conversations, and people have fun with it. They joke around, and I think now I get significant pushback on things, and people are more sort of courageous and open about how they feel. And as you know that if people feel that I can say my truth and express how I truly feel, even if that is not the team decision, I'm still more committed. So I think that's so important.
Niren, you must sometimes feel like you should be careful what you wish for. we call what you've described the pre-mortem. So if this idea, this decision we're about to make, turns out to be terribly wrong, and we're looking back on it from the future, what was it that made it go wrong? And then we try to head off that particular issue.
Yeah.
Let's get on to sustainability. Panera Brands has been there before. The brands promised to reduce carbon emissions by 15% by next year, or actually this year, and you beat that deadline. And now the really ambitious goal to be carbon positive by 2050 seems like a really big bite. What has to happen to be carbon positive?
Well, this is, climate change is one of those challenges I feel passionately about. And I think it's probably one of the biggest threats to humanity. And I think it's a moral imperative for all of us, to step up and do something about it and not just expect somebody else to do something about it. So I think with that mindset, we approach it. I don't know if you are familiar, but to the greenhouse gas emissions food production contributes, I think, almost 1/3 of greenhouse gas emissions. So the world of food production and the food industry is a contributor, and therefore restaurant companies have to play a disproportionate role. There's absolutely no way around it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think when we looked at it, I think countries and companies were making commitments towards being neutral by 2050. And I think that's great. But we wanted to just go take it a step further and talk about, well, we will actually be positive, so we'll take out more than we put in. So it's just taking it one step further, just to express our serious intent behind it. We don't have all the answers as to how exactly we will do it, but we're beginning to scope it. We're defining science-based targets as to what that means and how we need to get after it. And we're very serious about our intent. But then 2050 seems so far away, and then just making these commitments that is so far away doesn't kind of seem right. It's not enough. So then we raised our ambition and said we need to have more near-term targets. So by 2025, we've also committed to 3 important targets. One is to have 100% circular packaging by 2025. Second is that at least half of our cafes on the company side would be, would migrate towards renewable energy. And the third is that we will increase our climate-friendly food that we serve at Panera. I don't know if you're familiar, but we've recently done some work to measure the carbon footprint of our food. We call it cool food. And we will increase that from currently 45% to 60% by being more plant forward. So those are 3 important commitments that we've made that we want to get after by 2025. But are working, towards establishing and understanding what exactly do we need to do, and how will we get it done to be climate positive by 2050. It's something I feel passionately about, and our entire team and the company and all our associates do as well.
Niren, I feel exactly the same as you do about misinformation and information pollution and polarization. I think that, like climate change, it's one of the defining challenges of our generation. And I am particularly personally devoted to that. And I applaud you for your embrace of sustainability. And you're right, the math is the math. And if the restaurant industry is not leading the way, along with other industries, we will never make a dent in climate change. Let's circle back to the role of the CEO and leaders. I was once interviewing the founders of Refinery 29, another media company, who jokingly said to me that they know what the CMO does for their company, and they know what the CFO does. They work on marketing, they work on finances. And now that they are the CEOs, they don't know what they do. And I wonder what you say when someone say, all right, so what is your job as CEO? What's your answer?
Oh, that's so funny. When my kids were young and they'd ask me, Dad, what do you do? I mean, do you just eat chicken all day, or just eating food the whole day, and then you tell us you're tired? And I would also sit and wonder, what the hell do I do? But I really, I think, like I said to you, that I think the real determinant of success of a company is the people first culture, which is right people doing the right things the right way. And I see myself as the chief culture officer. And I'll explain what I mean. My biggest job, I think, is to make sure that I help define what the culture is, and then be the guardian at the gate in terms of who's let into the club and who actually needs to leave the club, whenever appropriate. So to me, culture is, how we show up. Culture is about how we treat each other. Culture is that special feeling that you create through common language. The end output of culture is trust. If you have trust in an enterprise, then you will help individuals unlock their true potential by themselves and also collectively as a team. And that's how you win. Now, culture, I believe that the way in which it has actually evolved and should evolve is that it is no longer statements of abstract values that are then printed and hung on a wall, like, integrity, honesty, customer focused. I think that's very hard and so open to interpretation. So I really believe that I want to be very specific about the behaviors. What are the behaviors? How do we want to show up? Because values nobody can see, thoughts nobody can read, but behaviors you can see. So therefore, articulating clear behaviors in terms of how we want to show up drives greater consistency of behavior in the enterprise. And through consistency, you create trust. And that's how you unlock full potential. So let me give you a feel for what that means at Panera. We call it the Panera Way. So the Panera Way basically has 6 values that are expressed in a behavioral language. So the first one is called warmth for guests, so that everything that we do should be anchored in our guests and serving the needs of our guests. The second is called bold thoughts, brave actions. The third one is kind of owning it, that, own your results. The next one is kind of winning together, collaborating with your teams. When you do that, to inspire and celebrate, and always, whatever we do, be rooted in respect. The 2 that are my favorite ones that I encourage a lot are bold thoughts, brave action. And I can tell you that if you embrace this behavior, you can achieve anything in life. Anything. Bold thoughts, brave action. So bear with me for a sec. So what it means is, for example, to achieve anything in life, 3-step process. First, have the audacity to dream of what you aspire to achieve without fear of constraints of current reality or resources. So be audacious in your dream. Once you do that, second, then have the curiosity to learn from those who may have done it before you. And third, once you do that and you've built the know-how, have the courage to act. Take that action without fear of failure. So if you do these 3 things, you will achieve extraordinary results personally and professionally. And the second favorite behavior of mine is to always be rooted in respect for each other, for our community, for our planet. So what we are doing right now, and what my main job is on culture, is that how do we institutionalize this culture? It should be leader-led. We should actually root this in rituals, have rituals, so that there's storytelling around this. Embed them in people processes, and then, ensure that you're holding yourself and the organization accountable. So I'm very passionate about this. I think this really, is my main job. I have to make sure that this culture is understood and we live by it. And I live by it, first of all, and then the others also do so. So it's such a great question. So I think I personally have what I call my personal sort of board of directors, mentors and friends who I know deeply care about me, who inspire me, and who are always very straight with me and tell me exactly the way they see it. So and I'll give you a few names, and of course my wife as well. My wife, she's my childhood sweetheart, my friend. I met her when she was 14. She knows me very well, and I think she gives it to me straight between the eyes, and I really appreciate it. So she's one who I also go to help just get clarity. But then I have David Novak, who's chairman and was a founder of Yum Brands. He's a great friend of mine. I have Peter Half, who's the chairman of JB, incredible leader. He's the other one. And then I have Paul Michaels, who was CEO of Mars Inc., who's also a dear friend and a mentor. And these people, they've been there, they've done it. They lead with their head and their heart. I feel that I'm wired very similarly, that you can do great things and tough things, but you can do it with compassion. So whenever I have moments where I need clarity, I reach out to them. And then I also have a personal coach, a guy called David Dodlick, who's been fantastic. And, so I think every leader needs somebody that they can go to who's not connected to the day-to-day, is not very close to the details, and can therefore step back and give you a real rational view on, how you could navigate some of the challenges that you might be confronting.
Yes. The idea of an executive coach has gone from being sort of a remedial, sort of semi-punishment for people who are not succeeding to being something that every CEO wants to have, just as much as Novak Djokovic, for example, has a coach, even though he's a pretty good tennis player. Actually, he might need a PR coach or a health coach at the moment, given his behavior at the Australian Open. But still,
it's hard to find, though. It's very hard to find the blend between somebody who's just an armchair professor and somebody who's done it, and somebody who's and who's willing to listen to you. And I think it's. But once you find one, I think it's like gold.
Yes, so true. Sort of a combination of part, seasoned executive, part therapist, and part best friend. You're right; it's a rare combination. Speaking of those personal issues, grief is an emotion that both of us, are familiar with. I lost my wife of 35 years 3 years ago, and you had tragically lost your daughter Aisha, which was not just terribly meaningful in ways that lots of people could understand, but one of the ways that you have come to terms with her death was a movie that was quite popular in India that talked about her life and her wisdom. Would you tell us about that and what it was like to go through that?
Yes, Eric. I think you and I are connected through pain, and I think the irreversibility of loss, which is so hard to comprehend, and I think you understand that very well. So yes, I lost Aisha, my 18-year-old daughter, in 2015. She died of pulmonary fibrosis, which is a hardening of the lung. And I think what's extraordinary about my daughter's life is that it's not that it's a sad story about a young child who died tragically so young, but a young lady who just lived life so incredibly well that she lit up the skies in the short gift of life that she had, because of the way in which she embraced what she had and made the most of what she could. She inspires me, and very often, even now, when I'm struggling and I'm looking for answers, I just put myself back in what she must have felt like when she had this incredible energy and spirit trapped into a body that is failing her, how she must have felt and how she coped. And yes, you're right. Her story is so inspiring that it got made into a movie called The Sky is Pink. It's on Netflix, which talks about her story and her extraordinary attitude. But I want to share, the 4 things that I learn from, I reflect on, and it has really shaped who I am and how I show up in my personal and professional life. The first one is courage. to have the courage to focus on that which you have control over, not what's happening to you. And then from whatever, my daughter used to say, whatever cards you're dealt with, that's what it is, but play the best hand. Jump as high as you can from wherever you are. That's what you can do. So focus on what you can do. So that's the first one, courage. The second one is about compassion, which is generosity. That you can still, even in tough situations, you can lessen the burden by just showing compassion and being generous to those around you, and leading with your heart, and how that is mysteriously healing in a way. The third one is gratitude, the power of gratitude. That no matter how bad things are, if you really think about it, there's always something to be grateful for. And if you apply the lens of gratitude, you can see everyday miracles around you suddenly, no matter how dire things are. And the last one is this thing about resilience, that for all of us, life is going to knock us down, but what matters is that we get up, and we get up and we fight, and we get knocked down and we get up and we fight, and we get knocked down and we get up and we fight one more time, trying to do the very best that we can every single day. And that's what I think life is all about. It's about being resilient and to keep moving, So I think those are some of the ways in which she inspires me. And I love talking about Aisha, because I feel every time I do so, she comes to life in the hearts of people who are listening to her story, and a remarkable spirit. She's also written a book called My Little Epiphanies, which is on Amazon, a collection of her thoughts when she lay dying on her bed just before she passed away. So she was indeed incredible.
Yeah. And the representation of her in The Sky is Pink is very, very moving. I'm going to close out by asking a hypothetical question, somewhat philosophical in nature. Niren, let's pretend that you have been given a great gift by some sort of genie. And that gift is for you to meet the 95-year-old Niren on his deathbed. And you are able to ask this wise old man what it is that you should do. What is the thing that he regrets that he never did, looking back on his life?
What a scary sight. I can see myself shriveled up and lying about 95 years of age. I really want to live life so well that I want to die with a smile on my face. That, man, I came here and I really gave it everything I had and left, everything on the mat, as they said. And I think I kind of, from Aisha and watching, having lost two of my daughters, I've realized the fragility of life and how precious life is, and how life basically unfolds one day at a time, 1 minute at a time. And how, if we have the mindset of just being able to enjoy the present moment by doing whatever we choose to do that gives us fulfillment and happiness and joy, that is the way to live. And I have come to that realization. Perhaps that's the gift I've gotten from the loss of my two daughters. And therefore, I think very often about what's my purpose. And my purpose is to inspire myself and those around me to be the best version of ourselves every single day in whatever gives us joy, So live life to the fullest and make every single day magical. And I hope that when I'm 95 years old, I'm just basically have a toothless grin. And I say, man, I really I really did that, I had an absolute blast. And I think it's time to go.
All right. That is good. So make sure you inspire others, bring joy to their lives, and leave it all on the field. Yeah. That's a good place to leave it right now, Niren. Thank you very much for being on The Human Factor. This was a wonderful interview, and you are one hell of a leader.
Thank you, Eric. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, and thank you all for watching. This has been The Human Factor, the CEO to CEO video series from Inc. My thanks to Paige Wollensack behind the camera, to the producers Lexi Birkin, Catherine Mainello, and Rose Levy. Thanks for watching. I'm Eric Schoenberg.